Hello guys, welcome to Disaster Management Complete Syllabus Explanation Series Part 4. Prevention. From the past experiences and the experience of Gujarat quake, it is clear that existing disaster management policies and practices are more concerned about the immediate relief and rescue operation and other crucial aspects like preparedness and mitigation, rescue and relief. Post-disaster rehabilitation is either ignored or are given negligible importance. Purpose of any disaster management is to provide timely response to any disaster by coordinating available resources to protect lives and the environment, mitigate the damage and provide a rapid return to normal operations. Succession of events in a disaster are not entirely predictable, hence published reports and operational plans will serve only as guide and checklist and may require field modification in order to meet the requirements of the event. Protecting the individual health in emergency means meeting physical needs like food, water, sanitation, shelter, hygiene, clothes, coverings, etc. Health needs like immunization, medical care, disease prevention, health education, dealing with injuries and disabilities. Social, emotional and psychological needs, especially in case of separation, injured or who have witnessed or experienced stressor. Management. After a massive disaster, the quality and severity of injuries will overwhelm the handling capacity of health facilities. Triage is the only approach that can provide maximum benefit to the greatest number of injured in a disaster situation. It is a means of rapidly classifying the injured on the basis of the severity of their injuries and the likelihood of their survival with prompt medical intervention. Higher priority is granted to victims whose immediate or long-term prognosis can be dramatically affected by simple intensive care. Health planning for emergency must be based on consideration of all phases of comprehensive emergency management. Reduction action to avoid the adverse health-related impacts of events likely to give rise to the emergency. Readiness. This includes planning, establishing and maintaining system and undertaking training for an efficient and effective health sector response to a potential emergency. Response. Identifying, mobilizing and deploying health resources immediately prior to or during an emergency, in collaboration with other services to ensure as far as practicable they are continuation of essential health services, relief and treatment of people injured or in distress as a result of the emergency and avoidance or reduction of ongoing public or personal health risk to all those affected by the event. Recovery action undertaken after an emergency include assessment of the health resources made available and managing the rehabilitation and restoration of the affected communities, health care services and health status, providing the supportive network by social and psychological services, so as to reduce long-term and chronic demands on health and social services. The health plan has 5 objectives. Maintain or restore health status of the population following a major incident. To define the communication network and procedures for alerting health service providers in the event of a disaster. To define the responsibilities for control and coordination of the collective response by the health sector to a major incident or outline the appropriate casualty, evacuation chain and the relative functions of agencies and institutions operating along it. To provide an overview and coordination of emergency response plans operated by hospitals and health services and other strategies health providers in the region. Priorities in early phases of emergency. Assess the sites. The situation is assessed taking into consideration following points. Delineation of the area and population affected. Find out the number of affected persons. Assess the health and nutritional status. Identify the risk factors. Find out the health needs and priorities of children and elderly. Assess the environment including water, sanitation and food supply. Find out helping agencies and what extra resources are needed. Assess the environment including agencies and what extra resources. Responsibilities of administrative agencies. Establish and re-establish communication and transportation network, creating a control room and establishing a hotline. Maintain electricity supply. Control over disaster tourism to prevent spread of disaster and maintain environmental hygiene. Water, sanitation and environmental hygiene. Many communicable diseases are spread through fecal contamination of drinking water and food. The importance of preparing the community on this score cannot be overemphasized. Water. Stocking water reserves. Water sources are to be protected. Store at least a 3-day water supply for each family member. The need of each person will differ depending upon age, physical condition, activity, diet and climate. A normally active person needs to drink at least 2 quarts of children, nursing mothers and ill people need more water. Additional water is necessary for food preparation and hygiene. At least 2 gallons of water per person per day should be stored. Storing of water. Water should be stored in clean and sanitary containers. Plastic containers are good because they are lightweight and unbreakable. Metal containers should be considered as last resort because they may corrode and tend to give water unpleasant taste. Water containers are to be distributed along with soap for personal hygiene. Contamination of water during collection of water, storage and transportation should be prevented. Purifying the water. In addition to having a bad odor and taste, contaminated water contains microorganisms. All water of uncertain purity should be purified prior to use. Through the best method of purifying the water is boiling it for at least 10 minutes. It is not feasible in the field. The alternate best method is solar water. Water is kept for 4 to 6 hours under sunlight in a transparent closed container, the dependent part of which can be painted black. The other method is chlorination. Instead of powder, either 1% solution or liquid chlorine bleach is added to water with a minimum contact time of 30 minutes. Residual chlorine kills pathogens from further contamination also. Chlorine tablets and iodine are not recommended. Sanitation. Defecation. The non-existent sanitation system makes the area virtual sitting duck for disease. The simple and quickest sanitation facilities are shallow French latrines, collective latrines and defecation areas or fields. This depends upon water table level, soil, locally available materials and people's habits and customs. It may require sanitation education to accept different sanitation practices other than they. Defecation should be at least 1 latrine for every 15 to 20 persons, and which should be regularly cleaned and disinfected. Defecation fields should be at least 15 meters away from water source, but near enough to be reached by children and elderly. Proper care and cleaning is to be ensured with supply of sufficient quantity with at least 25 centimeters of soil. Disinfection. The most commonly used and least expensive disinfectant is probably liquid chlorine bleach. A 5.25% solution of sodium hypochlorite is required for a liquid chlorine bleach to function effectively as a disinfectant. A common recommendation for final disinfecting rinse after flood cleanup of most hard surface is ½ cup per gallon of water. The dilution recommended for laundering clothing is 1 cup per wash load for top-loading washers. Bleach should not be added on top of clothes. Drainage. Storm water and wastewater can pollute drinking water sources because of poor drainage. Drainage trenches are to be built and stagnation in the pools is to be avoided. Solid waste disposal. Organize regular collection of water. Dispose of organic and medical waste and dead bodies by burning and landfilling. Shelter and site planning. Provide shelter and covering. Shelter may be in the form of temporary, residual units like tents, aluminum shelters, trapezium sheds, etc. Try to minimize overcrowding. Food and nutrition. Maintain food safety and supervise mass feeding facilities. Identifying and treat malnutrition. Following points need a thought. What foods are imperishable and do not need cooking and refrigeration? What foods are easily prepared? What foods are high in calories and proteins that will help to provide energy? What food appeals to family members? What foods are needed to meet the dietary needs of family members, such as babies, toddlers, diabetics and elderly? Food options to be avoided. Commercially dehydrated foods require a great deal of water for reconstruction and require extra effort in preparation. They also are inedible unless they are reconstituted. Bottled foods are too heavy and bulky and break easily. Preparation of whole grains, beans and pasta could be complicated under the circumstances of a food storage. Keep food in the driest and coolest spot in the house and in dark area if possible. Keep food covered at all times. Use plastic bag or tight containers. Open food boxes and cans carefully so that they can be closed tightly after each use. Health services. There is a common perception that a healthcare response to emergency will only involve major secondary and tertiary care hospitals, which is not so. Psychological and social health also needs attention. Decided on essential drugs list, case definition and standard treatment guidelines and policies. Treat common diseases, minor injuries and illnesses on-site only. Establish mobile units and reference system. Maintain routine vaccination including DPT, OPV, measles, rabies, etc. Mass immunization during natural disasters is counterproductive. It diverts limited human resources and gives false sense of health education. There is a common perception that healthcare response to an emergency will only involve major secondary and tertiary care hospitals, which is not so. Psychological and social health also needs attention. Decide on essential drug list, care definition and standard treatment guidelines and policies. Treat common diseases, minor injuries and illnesses on-site only. Establish mobile units and reference system. Maintain routine vaccination including DPT, OPV, measles, rabies, etc. Mass immunization during natural disaster is counterproductive. It diverts limited human resources and gives false sense of security. Health education. Find out myths and beliefs, attitudes and customary practices. Based on the health education on an understanding of people's cult, customs. Conduct community health education with participation of community leaders on all matters related to public health, sanitation, food storage, personal and environmental hygiene, child care, common diseases, peer-led school health activities, etc. Surveillance and control of communicable diseases and epidemic. Encourage the use of insecticides-treated bed nets. Immunize all children against measles if there is a risk of disease outbreak. Vaccinating all children irrespective of their immunization status is quicker and more effective method. Monitoring morbidity and mortality gives early warning of epidemics. Prepare contingency plans and stock of ORS and vaccines. Confirm outbreaks, conduct investigation, plan and implement control measures. Control and disposal of hazardous substances. This includes measures to tackle bioterrorism.